All right. Hello. Good afternoon. I just wanted to thank you for the conference and the audience for listening to me. It's about I'm having a combination. I just have 15 minutes, so I have to make a really short presentation. My subject was a script that I wrote for my business, for my organization. That was a business case. I hope you guys can use this code. I'm going to publish it, but I just have to rewrite it just a bit so that it's more like module-like. This is like, it's working. It's in production. It gets used all the time. So it's really sturdy and it works. So don't fret, it works. What I wanted to talk about, what I talked to some people is growth path. And I wanted to use this module to somewhat visualize that for you guys. I've wrote this business key. I've wrote this module for my business we are moving from on-prem to cloud, as many business of you probably are. So we had configuration manager on-prem, and we're moving all the workloads to Intune. One of the things we talked about is we're deploying things on-prem to users or devices from configuration manager. How can you do that in Intune? It works. I know Intune does practically the same thing as configuration manager, but one thing, I don't know if you guys use that, but in MECM, you have a way of folding out groups and saying, I want a collection with primary devices for my users. Because some things you have to deploy to users and some things you have to deploy to devices. Intune is the same thing. You can deploy things to users and you can deploy things to devices. But how? Because at our organization, the group structure in AD on-prem is really organized into nested groups. Intune does not do nested groups, nor do deployments, nor do assignments. You cannot have nested groups in assignments yet. They're working on it probably, but you can't do that. So I was thinking AD Connect, great, but it doesn't do nesting. It doesn't do recursively folding out groups. So why don't I do it myself? Like every script that begins with an idea, with a business case, and then just having fun coding that. So the thing that I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you all the code because it's a lot of code, but I want to show you how did I get to this business case? And what I did was try to imagine, I'm just taking a look at my notes, going back and forth. The business case was, you want to have primary device collections or primary or user collections with nested groups, and then just flatten them out for reusability in Intune. So what I did was, let's look up, let's synchronize groups that we use for our software deployment and sync them on our own to Azure or to Entra. The thing is, if you sync yourself, you have to go how does AD Connect work? So what I did was trying to explore graph and just finding out how does graph work. And then you get all of these code let's see, I'm not looking at myself. And then you get oh my God, sorry. And then you get the easy stuff, you get your members from the AD groups recursively, easy, AD on-prem, get them. Now let's find out and push them through to Intune in a Intune group that sort of has the same name, just for documentation, so you can follow this group is the same as this group, and we add a suffix and a prefix for the groups to distinguish between users and devices. Pretty much common. I mean, these are standard ways of doing that, distinguishing between users and devices by adding a suffix. AZ, I'm going to get back to that AZ because, well, in Azure, you have like the group, it's called the same thing as on-prem. If you're documenting and they're having both the same names, it's like really confusing in reports, like which is which. So we add a prefix AZ and that's completely dynamic variable. Sorry, guys, I'm going to have... we want to have a user group or a device group or both. I built the script so that it's completely dynamic. You can have on-prem the group with users or computers or both. One group can contain as well as users or devices. And on the side of Entra, you can have a group users and or devices. You cannot mix them because some assignments can only read out users and some assignments can only capture devices. But then I split them up, like I said, with the suffix user or device. But on-prem, the benefit of having on-prem as the master identity is that you can have the service desk actually do their job without having to without assigning them to permissions in Entra. So like they're used to that. They're managing on-prem, they're managing groups in AD on-prem, and they can keep doing that without any problems. They don't have to change their workflows. And we, on the other side, in Entra, can just assign, and we get the nice groups to assign to deployments. Sorry, a bit nervous. The next thing you want to do, it's like find out how can you sync users or devices or objects to Entra. So that was fun. That was really like discovering how Graph works and then finding that code in the documentation of Microsoft and just applying them inside functions. And then I get to my growth path. You start writing scripts. I started writing scripts like Exchange 2007, like getting mailboxes, doing stuff with mailboxes, and then you always go further. You're starting like one-liners, multi-liners. You add variables to make it dynamic. You think like variables, but what if somebody else, a colleague has to use that script, so you make params out of it. If you have params, you start thinking like, yeah, but I don't trust my colleague very much, so I have to use validation. So I'm going to show you, if I have the time, how to do that. And that's just like kind of best practices of PowerShell, but I really wanted to show you that. That's my learning path. And then I'm going to see like PS-bound parameters. The next thing you have to do is you can use params, you can use parameter validation. And if you use commandlet binding in your scripts or in your module, you can use like parameter set names, you can use verbose logging, you can use debug output and all of these nice things. So that's again another thing you start to learn while actually doing your job and while playing with PowerShell. Sorry. The thing is, then you started, sorry. Then the next thing you are going to do is like error catching, just try catch. And finally, is like, how can I say that's, you start making your scripts like, foolproof, as to say. So you're starting to make your script capture all the things that can go wrong with try catch. That's the next step. The other thing that I learned over the years is like this module, it's pretty big. I'm going to scroll down the end. And if you can read it all, very nice. But as you can see, that's a lot of code. I didn't start writing this. I started writing like, what do I need to do? What's the next step? What's the next step? And then I noticed something like, I can reuse this type of code, or I can like, put this in a function so that it's easier to read. That's another thing I've learned over the years. If you create code for your company, you get paid for that. And then if you publish this code or if you share that code among colleagues, it's very nice if it's readable. So the thing that I try to do with functions is like I kind of writing, it's kind of like writing a book with chapters. In the beginning, you have these, when you create a module or a function, you have this like beginning and process and end block. And in the beginning block, you write all your functions and your starting variables. And in the process, I try to write a story. So that's a business story. And the business story goes like, let me show you. Back all the way. I'm sorry, without glasses. So in the business story, there is this part. And I'm going to go through the process part. So yeah, it's a counter. It's like a loop, and I'm counting like stuff like outputting. Like this is the first group of so many groups. So you write progress to show to the user or show to the user of your module, like what's going on. Then for the thing is, then you go through each AD group that you want to sync. You get the members. I mean, does anybody, is it, how can I say, is it not clear what the process block is doing? A third group name, it's like I'm checking the name, the naming convention, like does it adhere to the Azure maximum length? Does it have like, I don't know, underscores that maybe you cannot use or are not allowed in your company? So I try to use the verbs and the nouns from PowerShell, but I try to make it readable. A third group name, to me, it makes sense. It's, if you're English speaking, it's like really clear what it does. AD members, get AD group member, it's clear what it does. Uses to sync, I create a generic list. Okay, that's another step you try to learn. You get to learn all these arrays. You have like hash tables and arrays, and then finally you make the step to generic lists. That's another step to learn. I have to be really quick. So, and then I say switch apply membership from. What does that do? It looks into AD group and it says, if there are users in there and you want to create a user group on the site of Entra, or if you want to create a device group on the site of Entra, just go through those steps. Users to sync, to add. That's a bit convoluted, but yeah, sometimes I'm a bit. So what I do is like I make an array of these objects that I want to sync, and I call them like, I give them names, my variables, like users to sync or devices to sync, which I think another word that is quite clear about what it does. And by using the generic list or by using an array, you can use the add, which is another way of saying like, I've got this list of objects and I want to add an object, which I think, again, in English, clearly says what it does. Then I'm going to apply membership from. If I want to create, if I want to have devices on the site of AD, and I want to create a user group from those devices in AD, or I want to create a device group, again, apply membership from. And then you have the next word says apply membership to. So apply membership to, what it does, it makes a user group on the site of Entra, or it makes a device group on the site of Entra. Azure group name is actually a concatenation of the prefix of, yeah, trim. It's always nice to trim things because spaces are like, and it's actually concatenation before you do the next step. And the next step is to sync those objects to Entra. Sync Azure group membership, again, a function which is actually sync, tells you what it does, and it tells you on what kind of object it will sync upon. Sorry. And this is the biggest block of my script, is like going through all the graph code to sync those devices, to sync those objects to Entra. Yeah, not much to tell about, except that I had a lot of fun trying to come up with all the right parameters to do that actually on the site using the graph modules. Another thing that I try to do is I try to, like, if I want to do something and there's a way to do it, but there are multiple ways to do it, I try to like educate my colleagues, like, you can do it this way. And just a bit further in the code, I'm doing the same thing, but just a little bit different. So if you are educating your colleagues, they like, why is it happening this way? And why is it happening that way on the next line? Something, yeah, I know it's a lot to take in, but I have to be real short. So the thing is, I use splatting in my code, which is another thing I've heard, like, not everybody knows about, but it's a really great thing of like making your code readable so you don't have to scroll sideways all of the time. And then I try to, that's a personal thing, I try to avoid dependencies. So the one thing you see, you get mg group, it's a graph module, it's a graph commandlet, but if you want to, you can also use the API SDK, the software development kit from Graph, to do actually the same thing. And then again, you see sorry. And then again, you see the same error catching, like throw and finally and catch. Voilà. Right. If the Azure AD group exists, then I start syncing the objects. And how do I do that? I get all the group members from the Azure group. I'm looking at the AD group members, and I'm just comparing them based on the user principal name. Easy. Except sometimes you throttle, sometimes UPN is not correct. So again, you have to do a try catch. Why is there not a try catch in this piece of code? Because further down the script, you will get an output to the logs, and that will show you the error. Members to compare. I'm going further. If members to compare, if there are no differences, of course, the log will say there's nothing to do. If there are differences, and it's using, again, the very basic compare object from PowerShell itself to reference, to return the objects that are different, again, based on the ID. Another thing that I had a lot of fun, that was the next step. I tried to create this module step by step, and the next step that I found is that sometimes if the script runs for the first time, it took like 3/4 of an hour to like sync about 200 groups, which was very long, of course. But the thing that I found is you can have batch adding of members. You cannot batch remove, but you can add batch adding members. So that piece of code I added later. If the members count is greater than 1, then do batch adding of objects. Sorry, I had very little time to if members to remove, just the same thing. What it does is actually compare object adds a assignment operator, like greater than or smaller than. So depending on the comparison property, you can select if members have to be added or members have to be removed. And then, yeah, you can do the graph action to the applicable graph action. So as you see, there's just a lot of code. I'm not going to explain all the code. I hope it's readable. Something else that I wanted to say, I don't know how much time I still have. Oh, I'm already way past. Sorry. So yeah, that was it. Sorry. That's what I wanted to show you guys. Like, if anybody can use that, please feel free to approach me. This is working in production environment for like months right now, so it really works. And it has a use case that is not available with AD Connect. Thank you.